That's hilarious. All right. Welcome, folks. Hope we have a couple people join us here. So we're going to start doing this more regularly. We're going to call this Motorsports Monday. So we want your feedback on the timing. Let us know if this works for you. We're in the Central Time Zone, so we're hoping that 4:30 can kind of catch people in the afternoon on the West Coast, catch it after you're done with work on the East Coast. But we can adjust it. Obviously, this video will be saved on our wall, so we're going to hopefully share some information that you can use going forward about the Apex Pro device. So it's going to primarily be centered around building kind of a sense of community, kind of growing the tribe of Apex Pro users and people that want to discuss the product in more detail, learn some of the nuances and how we can help you improve as a driver. But we're also going to cover some things just like topics of the week, what's going on in the motorsports world, and any other topics that you want to discuss. And all that stuff is going to be communicated through the Apex Pro users group. So if you're not a member and you're an Apex Pro user, get on there. So go ahead and chime in. If anybody's here, go ahead and let us know. See Taylor Pruitt's on there. Hey, congrats on getting engaged, Taylor. That's awesome. I need to be following along more closely than just knowing that, but excited for you. That's super cool. So a couple of things we're going to dive into once we get going are explaining why we see red lights on the Apex Pro device on straightaways. It's really pretty simple, but I'll hop into that and discuss that in a minute. Get a lot of people asking that, so I just wanted to put the answer out there for you, so it's nice and easy to digest. And then when you see green in the corners on your post-session review, what is that telling you? How do you dive into more detail? Does that mean you're at the limit of the tire? Those are the two things we're going to primarily be discussing. So I will we'll jump into that here in just a minute. And just to give you an example of that, I pulled up some data from Roebling Road Raceway, and we can see on here all green on a couple of the corners on the track. Does that mean the device is actually all green? That's the phrase of the day here. Hint, no, it doesn't. But we're going to give you all the information that you need to know to properly digest that and understand it. Before we do that, a little news session here at Petit Le Mans this past weekend. Big event in the sports car world. Congrats to everyone there that won the race, won a championship. There's a lot going on, a lot of moving and shaking. The Tequila Patron team no longer running next year. That kind of sucks because there won't be tequila at the events anymore. Or at least previously, you could go up to the Tequila Patron bar at all the races and get all your libations and whatnot. So that's pretty awesome. The SCCA runoffs happening right now at Sonoma Raceway. So I got a couple of folks using Apex Pro out there. Big shout out to them. Thanks for being there. Thanks for repping our stuff. Hope you win. That's James and Drew. Hope you guys are both watching. Good luck. It's going to be cool. Wish we could be there. It's always a good excuse to go out to Sonoma, Wine Country, USA, and check it out. So we'll jump into our first topic here and explain why the lights are red on the straightaway. So I've got a Skip Barber branded Apex Pro device right here. Skip Barber Racing School, the only place you can buy this device. There you go. Yes, you do. We'll get Taylor a Apex device so you can use it on your mountain drives. You can actually create a custom track too, so you can get lap times, while you're driving around on mountain roads and stuff like that. So we have our custom branded Skip Barber powered by Apex Pro device here. So that's what I'm going to use for the explanation. Hopefully that's not too blinding. But the first thing we're going to dive into is why do we see the red lights on the straightaway? So let's just pretend we're exiting a corner onto a straightaway of the track. Let's say Road Atlanta is a good example. Any track where we're going to have straight line acceleration. So after we exit the corner, we have a lot of steering in the car as we're going through the corner, right? There's a lot of load. So not only do we have lateral load, we have longitudinal load. So as we're accelerating, so lateral is cornering load, longitudinal would be acceleration. We're accelerating and we're cornering at the same time, right? So that's a lot easier to be at the limit of the tire, right? If the tire can only has 100% grip, it's pretty easy to use 90% of it cornering and accelerating at the same time, right? So lateral and longitudinal load. That's why it's going to be easier for us to get all green lights at the apex of a corner because the tire is doing multiple things at once. Now, as we start to accelerate, right, we're going to see those green lights turn into red, probably all the way up through, let's say, third gear. Most cars, a higher horsepower car, take a Corvette or, an 911, something with around 500 horsepower, while it's cornering, probably has the potential to spin the tires up through third gear on a street tire, right? On a stick gear tire, maybe not. So you're what we call traction limited, right? If you're traction limited in a straight line, you can achieve green lights, all the way down the straightaway. So if you have 1,000,000 horsepower, you're accelerating like a rail dragster, you could see green lights all the way down the drag strip, basically, right? Now, the reason that we see red lights on a road course in a car that's not traction limited, so take your average Miata, any car that's on the track, really, at some point, you're no longer traction limited in a straight line. You're accelerating third to fourth gear, and what do you see? Red lights. Apex is a grip-based, traction-based system. Think about it like traction. If you're not close to the edge of traction, you're only asking the tire to do one thing, accelerate. Guess what? The tire can actually do more. All right, it could use more horsepower. You can always take more horsepower once you get into fifth gear, right? And that's why it's showing you red lights. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not. All it knows to do is build a model of what the tire's experiencing. If you don't like that about it, that's fine. Doesn't really matter. But everything else that it does into the corner, braking, cornering while you're adding load to the car, that's when it's most relevant, right? The biggest thing about real-time feedback is if it's that real-time, right, and you want to adjust something immediately to do something about it, what adjustment can you actually make on a straightaway, right? Not much. If your foot's on the floor, get on the floor. If it's not on the floor, you're going to see less red lights. You get on the floor, you're going to see a few more for a second, right? It can also kind of help you optimize shifting. Something that you'll notice, you'll see red change to green when you shift. Obviously, you want to see those red lights sustain for as little time as possible. That can help you get out of the clutch, get into the next gear, kind of time your shifting. So you actually can use that for something. Now, that is something that we're working on because it's more helpful. It'd be more helpful basically for you to know, hey, am I accelerating down the straightaway as quickly or as efficiently as I was last time? Am I carrying the speed out of the corner faster or better than I was last time? So there are some things that we need to adjust from our end because I think it'd be more helpful like that. But you do see those red lights on the straightaway, and that's what it's telling you. If you ever have a chance to watch the device in a video, you'll really kind of understand that. When there's very little acceleration, which usually is, steady state on a straightaway, not cornering, not braking, just accelerating. When you were coming out of the corner in second or third gear, you're accelerating at 0.8, 0.7, G's, positive G's, the longitudinal acceleration. And when you grab another gear, right, you're now at 0.5, 0.4. And because there's no other variables to input into the software, to input into the algorithm, there's no lateral G's, maybe there is cresting in the track, you'll see that reflected in it, but say the track's flat, then you're going to see those red lights while you're at steady state acceleration, or closer to steady state acceleration. Now you will notice if you go uphill, you're probably going to see even more red lights because it's all of a sudden registering, hey, now that you're driving uphill and the tires are being forced into the ground, there's more grip. So there's going to be even more red lights. So like the hill, the backstretch of BIR, when you start climbing that hill, you'll see some red lights there. So there's all sorts of things to notice. Now, what can you do about it in real time? If you're seeing red lights on the straightaway, not much. It's really only relevant on corner exit, accelerating up through the gear. Now, if you still have steering input in the car and you're seeing red lights, that's when you need to adjust something, right? Usually that means, hey, go ahead and get to the floor on the throttle, right? Because going fast down a straightaway is all about who gets to wide open throttle first, not who gets to the throttle first. So you can kind of use Apex as a reminder, hey, if I'm already at 50% throttle, might as well be at 100. All right, and a way to think about that is the pedals are all about weight transfer. So your first touch of the pedal, your first input on either of the pedals is going to transfer them, is going to make the biggest difference, I guess, in weight transfer. It's a good way to think about it. So if you're trailing some brake into a corner, brake, we're turning, we're releasing, and now we're back on power, that initial touch of the throttle does the vast majority of the weight transfer, right? Because when you release the brake, the spring is naturally going to release, the car's going to neutralize. When you add throttle, that's what's going to settle in the rear end. If you're already at 50%, the car's already kind of hunkered down. It's a technical term. hunkered, it's hunkered down, you might as well get the car to 100% throttle. And that depends on, if you have a turbocharged car, 1,000 horsepower, might be a different story. But that's a good way to audit yourself with the apex lights on corner exit. Hey, I'm seeing a couple of red lights. I'm looking down the straightaway. I'm still steering. I'm on the throttle, seeing a couple of red lights. Okay, idiot, you could be at 100% throttle already. That's a good reminder, because I find myself very often squeezing into the power on corner exit, right? And I'm getting into it 50% throttle. And then I'm kind of getting a little hesitant because I'm wondering if the car can take it. And if I have apex there with a couple of red lights, I know I should already be all the way on the throttle. So that's really what you want to use it for, is corner exit. So for folks that have just joined, we've been diving into explaining why the red lights appear on the straightaway. And that's basically because the tire has more traction and more ability to use traction, right? The tire's not working as hard as it possibly could be in most cars, unless you're in like the Mark Donohue Porsche 917K, 1,500 horsepower qualifying trim, spinning the tires all the way down the straightaway. But that is something that we're working on for the future, because it could be more helpful if it was giving you more insight to your driving specifically, because it's much easier to see the lights on the straightaway also. There you go. Hey, John, welcome. Trust the lights? Yes, sir. It's got it. And that's something that, and we'll go into a second here on post-session analysis, now that we've kind of explained. If anyone has any questions, feel free to chime in. I know it's kind of a macro approach, but when you really think about what the device is able to consider, remember that the device, it's only measuring the results of the accelerations, right? It's not measuring, it doesn't know what kind of tire you have, it doesn't know how much horsepower you have, it doesn't understand what your suspension is, it doesn't need to know any of that. But it's only using inertial measurements, right? If it was able to model your horsepower, it knew exactly how much power you had, it knew your dyno chart, right? It knew all that kind of stuff, then maybe it could predict something about exactly where you should be on the straightaway. But what it's saying is, we're only accelerating at this G, at this speed, blah, 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 blah. Why can't we do this faster? That's why it's showing you red. Pretty simple. So when you add steering input and you're asking more of the tire and you're on the brakes or something like that, that's really what it's designed for. It's anybody can drive fast on the straightaways, right? It's not designed to say, hey, right, press the gas pedal harder. You're already doing that. Don't worry about the feedback on the straightaways. It's something that becomes really powerful once you're able to see it going into and exiting corners. So the next thing we'll jump into here in a minute is the green view on heat maps on post-session data review, and we're talking about this right here. So I'm looking at Roebling Road Raceway from this past weekend. We're seeing a green driving line over the track, and a lot of times what we'll have, someone using Apex will ask, they'll say, well, what can I do to improve? I'm already all green there. All right, and we want to dive into, first of all, what this values, what the map, what it's using to display. And then we're going to show you a couple of other tools to really pull out that information. So it's important to know that the color on the map is essentially an average, right? So as you're going through a corner, say turn 1 at Roebling Road, right, you're very easily at that speed, it's a pretty quick entry, you're very easily using at least 70-75% of the grip of the tire. Very, very easily. If you just brake relatively hard, you carry in even 10 miles an hour slower than you could, you're adding steering input and you're rolling in a lot of speed. So we see the lights on the device, and this is, if you're on intermediate or expert skill level, this is only about the last 25% of the friction circle, the Apex device. The previous 75% of that's already all green, right? That's why you see green on the track. Because even if you're at 75%, say, grip on the track, you're still going to see mostly green lights. And what the device is valuing, or what the phone is taking out of the device is, hey, over X value, we display green because the device was mostly green. But you can use some tools in the app to really dig into what you're actually seeing there. Now, obviously, if we change the ticker, which is right here in the middle, to speed or longitudinal acceleration or lateral acceleration, then we're going to see the lap colored by those variables. We're strictly talking about Apex score. So one thing we can do is we can tap the lap. And you see I tap the lap right there. And if I press and hold, it's going to actually now get bigger. That's a new improvement. So I can see right there, even though the lap is light green, it's mostly green, I'm actually only instantaneously using 68% grip at that point on the track. That means there's a lot of grip left right there. All right, but the track's still colored green because that's just how it's valued in the app. There was still 68%, green lights right on the device. Okay, so that's why we're seeing that. But we can actually see the coloring of green, the greenness of the line actually makes a difference. A darker green, the closer to 100%. And this is all stuff that can always, get better, but it's just information I want to put out there. So that's one easy tool to go say, hey, how much grip am I using right there? And you'll notice that usually the closer to the apex of the corner, the higher the apex score you're going to have because you're adding more steering. And what are we doing when we're adding steering? We're asking the tire not only to be loading in our longitudinal direction, slowing down or accelerating, but we're also adding lateral load to the tire. And the more steering input we have, the more that chassis is going to be bound up, and the more grip of the tire that we're going to be using. But something we can really look for is like a really, really fast driver is going to be using almost 100% of the grip from turn in to track out, right? So a really, really quick driver, you won't see that 68% grip score. Now, maybe on a corner where you have to adjust a little bit in the middle, turn 7 at Barber, load the car up on entry, open up your hands a little bit, brake, and then turn again. But on a steady state, kind of constant radius corner, or something like this turn 1 at Roebling, you should be able to get all the way to the limit of the tire on entry. That's a fast corner on entry, so that's a place you have to work up to it. Now, the second tool we can use is the light replay. So now we're assuming iOS, Apple devices. This functionality is not on Android, but we'll just hop in here and press the play button right here. That's going to replay the lap. So now we're going to see the little dot, the car, driving through the lap. And we're also going to be able to see what we were seeing on the device. So now you'll notice it's mostly green on the lap, but I just paused the replay there, and we can see there's 3 red lights appearing on the device right there. Now we're in intermediate mode. We can also tap the lap and see how much grip we are using right there. Right, we've still got, 72%, right where I'm looking at it now. So that's what we're seeing represented on here. So we must be in intermediate mode. Right, on expert mode, we'd actually see probably 2 or 3 more red lights right there. So what that means is that we overslowed. We brake too early or we brake too much, usually both, right? So on quick glance, it looks like we're optimizing the line through there. It looks like the only places we're going slower in the straightaways. You just have to understand what the Apex system, what it values, all right, and how it displays that in the phone. Now, if we want to get further insight into how do I know I'm decelerating right there? How do I know I'm braking? Change the ticker down to AX, that's longitudinal acceleration. And now where we see the red line is going to show us deceleration. The yellow line is going to show us kind of closing, getting back to a neutral acceleration, and then green is going to be accelerating. All right, so red is decelerating, green is accelerating when we're valuing AX, looking at AX. So we can actually see what's interesting about turn 1 and Roebling here is we know we overslowed in this driver's lap here because he's actually accelerating into the corner or very close to static, negative 0.1 G right there. So that tells me right away from longitudinal G's that there's more speed to be had in that corner, right? Because you should be decelerating all the way, slowly all the way through there if you're rolling as much speed as you can. So hopefully that's some insight and some resolution into those 2 topics. Why do we see red lights on the straightaway? And what do we do when we see that green coloring somewhere and we know we're not using all the grip? So the 2 things to do are to tap the lap and to see the little dot appear. That's going to give you your instantaneous apex score, instantaneous speed, whatever you have selected, right? Or replay the lap and see how many red lights we're seeing at that point. And then we can make some assumptions and some judgments. Now, it's really important to watch an entire cornering sequence when we're looking for the red lights. So we don't just want to necessarily look instantaneously and go, oh, I'm using 50% grip there. It's like we really need to watch the whole cornering sequence and see what the progression of red to green lights look like. And that's going to give us the most insight into that. So it does take a little bit of time to dive into it. Remember, our alternatives here are a much more complex system that's going to require us to have 5 different math channels and 10 different graphs on the same page. And we're going to have to look at it, probably have a baseline lap to compare it to. Right now, we're basically saying, hey, I know I'm not using all the grip right there, right? I saw some red lights. I need to go work on it there. So the value to that is I can very easily go in and look at 3 different corners and figure out which ones I'm leaving the most grip on the table. And then guess what? I don't waste my time in places I'm already doing pretty good. I can go back out there and I can find lap time because I can go, hey, I'm seeing a lot of red lights into turn 1. I'm not at turn 5 and 6, but those are other 2 places where I might be struggling a little bit. Let me go work on those 3 places, 1, 5, and 6. Everywhere else, I don't need to focus as much. If I learn something, great. But a lot of times focusing on those places where we aren't as competent or not as comfortable, what does that do? Have you ever gained speed in a corner that you're previously not very comfortable in? Guess what happens to the next corner? It now comes at you a lot quicker, right? It looks different. So a lot of times you find speed in one corner, the next corner, the horizon, give me that horizon, right? Comes to you a lot faster. Then you got to adjust for that. A lot of times as people, we have the tendency when we go faster through the corner, we carry confidence in a corner we were not as confident in before. Now we're accelerating at a faster rate to the next corner, carrying more speed into the next corner. What are we going to tend to do? Maybe be a little tentative, brake a little early, brake a little hard, right? Fight or flight, right? Keep myself out of trouble. I know I'm going faster. Let me brake earlier. Well, guess what? If we got comfortable in that previous corner, using more grip, what might we be able to do in the next, right? That's where trusting the lights comes in handy. And all you got to remember about this thing is the reason that this is able to know what it knows is because it's measuring thousands and thousands and thousands of micro accelerations every second, right? And cross-referencing it with different things. It's not something that our brain can do. We can't go, okay, -1G at 46 miles an hour. And we can't do that, right? That's what it's doing. And it's going, hey, based on what I've seen already, you might want to know, I think there's more grip here, right? That's what it's doing. So when people ask me about it and they go, well, this, I'm like, it's real simple. Using inertial measurements, you don't have to know anything about the car. You're measuring the result. We're taking the results of the test. We're not asking the questions, right? Hopefully that kind of gives some insight into it. It's real simple. So we explain red lights on the straightaway, basically fairly neutral acceleration, you're going to see red lights. Apex score doesn't value neutral acceleration very high, right? It wants to see lots of accelerations. So that's why you're seeing red lights there. Don't dig too into it. If you're in a slow car, you might see red lights a little further down the straightaway or a little earlier on the straightaway. It's just reality of it. If you're in a traction limited car, you might be able to sustain green lights further down the straightaway because guess what? You're going to use more of the tire in a straight line. Same thing if you're on street tires versus slicks. So take, Mustang GT, 500 horsepower-ish, 450, something like that. On street tires, you might be able to spin the tires with some lateral acceleration in the car out of the corner in third gear. On slicks, you won't be able to, right? So you actually be able to use more of the grip, more apex score going down the straightaway. That's just kind of hoping to expose some things that the system values because admittedly we haven't done a great job of getting that information out there, and that's why we're doing this. To kind of have that, stifle that conversation a little bit. And then also green and corners during post-session review, go in and replay that lap or dive in and tap the lap and look at your instantaneous grip, and that should give you some resolution into what was the device actually showing me there, instead of just, hey, looks good, I'm all green, right? We got to have that attitude of learning the tool a little bit before we can really expect to get a lot out of it. And that'll be true no matter what data product you use. It's not just us. I'm just of the opinion that it requires a lot less learning coming from someone who's used Aim Race Studio and Motec i2 Pro, not as extensively as some of my other friends that have an engineering degree, but I've still navigated it and tried to make sense of it. And I don't enjoy it because it's a little too intense, and it's also not something I'm ever going to get out of any information out of them at the track, which for me, it's always most impactful to review some simple data metrics at the track because it's fresh and it's easy to validate or change in mindset, right? So I'm hoping that's helpful. This will be stored, on our wall. If you're not part of our Facebook group, please be part of our Facebook group. Also, for people that are already customers, have friends that are interested in being customers or wanting to try an Apex Pro, hopefully we'll be doing some holiday promotions. We should be. So stay tuned. We'll be promoting that on Facebook. Also, we have a couple of blog posts that are going up on our website. If you're not already on our mailing list, shoot us a message with your email, drop it in the comments here. We'll add you to the mailing list. We're going to be adding blog content on our website that should be sent out to your emails. We won't spam you. We'll send one every 2-3 weeks, just some Apex Pro related content. If you have interest in writing something for our blog, maybe you use Apex, it's helped you learn something. Hey, I was being a pansy in this turn, and then I saw all these red lights and learned to get on the throttle, right? You want to write something for the blog, where we'd love to post your content. So send that over to us. Same thing with pictures. If you want Apex graphics or anything like that from your car, for your car, drop us a note. Yeah, don't want to sound like a commercial here. Just got a lot going on. Feel free to let us know what kind of topics you want to see on these. It's not going to be the Jerry Springer show. Hopefully it's pretty exciting though. More so than not. You got any good ideas for lovely background? We're thinking about doing a green screen so I can kind of be like the weatherman, right? Be like James Spann. I'm going to get a bow tie and some suspenders and stuff like that. All right, folks, it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for joining us. We got some pretty good activity here, so it's good to see a bunch of familiar names. And join us next week. We're going to do Motorsports Monday again. John Kinley, I just saw your question. I'm sorry. Can Apex Sport be greater than 100%? So sometimes you'll see that instantaneously that it will be. It'll be like a little spike of greater than 100%. That's just a bug in the way that the score is transmitted to the app or to Track Attack. It shouldn't be able to be greater than 100%, but sometimes that's just basically, think about it like if you take a really high resolution photo with a camera and then you transfer it to a computer or something like that. Some of that resolution is lost in that transfer of file size and data and everything else. So what the device is actually sampling is extremely high resolution and is going to be really, really accurate to what your butt's feeling. Then when it transmits that to the phone, it has to simplify that in order for it to be downloadable by the phone. And then that has to be simplified again to be downloaded into Track Attack. So that needs some smoothing to really bring things to light. But where I think Apex score is the most relevant is on turn-in, right? When you first start loading the car up, turn-in. And then on track out as well. At the Apex, obviously, if you got a lot of steering in the tire, you got a lot of scrub in, you can always get understeer and just add more steering, right? So looking at turn-in is really important. And that can be harder to see, especially in fast corners in the car. But we're here to constantly get better and improve. So thanks for continuing to ask the questions, guys. Make sure you're on our users group. Really appreciate everybody that chimes in. Thanks for being a part of an awesome community. We want to be here to serve you, make you better. We'd love your feedback as to what you are looking for from us. And thanks for being a part of the team, right? Bring your friends, right? Make sure that they know we can compare Apex scores, right? There's nothing better than being able to airdrop your data to somebody so you can not only show them that you're faster than them, but why you're faster than them, right? All right, everybody. Hope you have a great week. Happy Monday. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will talk next week.